Alrighty, I guess I'm giving a speech.
You are.
Yeah, no pressure.
Okay. So I just attended the Strong Towns National Gathering, and one of the things I was really struck by was the founder, Charles Moran's, convictions about a bottom-up movement and the emphasis on humility and on patience and empathy and meeting people where they are. And I saw that manifested not just in this, kind of highfalutin keynote speech, but also in the actions of the individual activists of that group. Like the Parking Reform Network, they constantly talked about how they achieved their goals by actually going into these communities and like actually talking to people, hearing their objections, and finding a way to communicate their goals, which was to remove parking mandates. And to communicate that to people who thought they were a bunch of, hippies who wanted to, eliminate cars. And so they overcame those objections through humility and empathy. And so, the Georgists have adopted this symbol. So how many of you know what this symbol means? Don't say it out loud, just raise your hand if you know what it means. Okay, just a couple people.
I forgot already.
So we know that it means in America it's the symbol of Georgism, but it's actually co-opted from a pre-existing Japanese symbol, and that symbol is the Shoshinsha. And the Shoshinsha in Japanese culture is primarily the emblem of a student driver. And it generally means, watch out, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So why would the Georgists choose this as their emblem? Well, for one, it's green and gold, which are the traditional colors of our movement, and it looks like a shield, which is appropriate enough. And not too many people know what's going on in Japanese culture and aren't going to associate us with people who don't know what we're doing. However, I would submit that this is actually the perfect symbol for our movement because of the other ways that it is used in Japanese society. New mothers use this symbol to indicate to care workers that they are new at this thing and that they need extra help. New employees bear this symbol to signal to the rest of their company that I'm new at this and I need to learn how to do things. In video games, this usually is a symbol that will indicate this is the tutorial. There are certain characters in certain animes who will have this symbol on them, and it means, I want to learn. I want to learn from the beginning. I think this is the perfect symbol for our movement. We all come from different backgrounds and different faiths, or no faith at all. But I happen to be an Orthodox Christian, and my favorite book on spirituality was written by Archbishop Anthony Bloom. It's called Beginning to Pray, and this archbishop, who has attained the highest heights of wisdom, within my tradition, writes this very humble and very short book, which is about coming back to the beginning and understanding the fundamentals. And I think this is what Georgism is fundamentally about when it comes to economics and political economy. We have gotten it so wrong because of how much we think we know that just ain't so. Right? And the solution is to go back to the beginning and take on a humble attitude and learn what we have forgotten, what we have learned wrong. But we Georgists must not make the same mistake that everyone else made, which is to think that we have gotten everything figured out already and that we are here to teach the world. We have this idea that we know is transformative, and how do we get it into the world, right? And I think by adopting the attitude that is embodied both by what I just saw by the activists at Strong Towns who are having smashing success after starting off just as some cranky guys on the internet who are pissing everyone off, something we can certainly relate to. I think they've laid out a path for us to succeed. And also, I think it's time, I think we should fully embrace both meanings of this symbol, not just the ones we've attached to it, but those that are available natively in Japan. Because we're going to go there eventually too. And I'm going to have to give this speech in Japanese. But what I want to say is I really appreciate that y'all have all come here to listen to me. And I want to embody the principles I've just said, because I just came from another conference out in the valley. And I'm just some guy who wrote some articles one day. Basically, I plagiarized somebody else, and I've been rewarded for it with niche internet micro-celebrity. And, they were Henry George's words, not mine. I just kind of put them in a modern context. And I'm fully convinced that if I had done so 10 years ago, nobody would have cared, right? I think that the reason things caught fire is not because I'm a genius or anything. You know, if anything, the genius is Henry George's, but it's because of the timing. And what's special about the timing? And the timing is that the material conditions under which Georgism first became the necessary and obvious solution have reproduced themselves, and that time is now. It is what people are already calling the second Gilded Age, people outside of our movement, and they're dead right about that. And what are those material conditions that caused Georgism to become the answer to that solution, and what happened in the century in between? You know, I won't waste your time regaling all of it, but just to briefly summarize, it was the paradox of progress and poverty. How can you have so much material wealth and abundance and material progress, right? That's what people forget. In the late 1800s, society had come a long way just from 100 years ago. They had just recovered from a devastating civil war that was only a couple decades away in memory. And already we were seeing just leaps and strides, you know. There were already skyscrapers by the time George was, you know, in George's time. People forget that. There were skyscrapers in the late 1800s, you know. These cities of New York and other places had millions of people in them already. Some of those cities have declined in population since then. Wow. You know, lest we think that, you know, the world was smaller then. In many ways, it's smaller now. And what happened was that it was impossible to have true grinding poverty unless you also had magnificent progress. They were in some way perversely linked, but not linked in the same way that the socialists thought they were. It was linked in this perverse way because of the land problem, which everyone treated as a species of capital, and which George showed us, you know, clearly was just something we thought we knew that just ain't so. What happened in the century since? You know, I think a couple of things happened. I think the main thing that I always like to say is that America is a frontier nation with a frontier mentality, but no frontier. And that makes a big difference. You know, the frontier was always America's answer to the land problem. In the first stage, it was, okay, just go west, young man. That is the Jeffersonian yeoman farmer solution to the land problem. And it worked for a good long time. I mean, unless you were an Indian, then things worked out much less well for you. Or a member of one of the other underprivileged classes, such as a slave, you know. But for those who were clued in, who were cut into this deal, such as my long lost cousins up in Minnesota and North Dakota, you know, with European immigration, in the Willamette Valley and all of that, the Oregon Trail, it was magnificent for them. But the problem is it doesn't last, because eventually the frontier closes, right? Well, something miraculous happened that surprised the Georgists, and also, you know, also prevented America from learning its lesson, for good and for ill, which was there was a second frontier, and that second frontier was the automobile. The automobile opened up new land. Actually, it's right in line with Ricardo's law of rent, so perhaps George should have anticipated it. His book certainly did, even if he himself did not. And the automobile opened up new land for cultivation. Cultivation in the sense of you can have a job in the city, but you don't have to live there. This took the pressure off of, it took the pressure off. It came with its own costs, and those costs were real, and they were huge, and we are dealing with them today. But it allowed America to kick the can down the road for a century. And anytime America has an opportunity to kick the can down the road for a century, you can be dang sure that we're going to take it, as is our right as Americans. But eventually, that century comes to an end, and some other poor saps have to deal with that problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we are those poor saps. And we stand here today at the end of the closing of the second frontier. And that is what a Gilded Age is. It is when the frontier closes and the poor saps are left sitting around a table asking themselves, well, what shall we do about the paradox of progress and poverty? And the answer today is the same as it was in George's time. We need to tax the land. We need to, but it's not just about taxing the land, it's about the principle underneath it. We need to share the land. There are solutions beyond just land value tax. These were adopted in other countries. countries. For instance, my own country, my own other country, because I have two countries. My mother's a Norwegian immigrant. I was born and raised in Texas. So first and foremost, I'll always be an American, as my cousins in Norway never cease to remind me. And which I'm dang proud of at the same time. But yes, my heart also belongs to, also pines for the fjords, as also certain blue-feathered parrots do. And in the old frosty hinterlands of Norway, they, over the last century, made a couple of really good decisions that are not always well known, either by the world at large or by Georgists themselves. The Norwegian Georgists never made the correct decision to tax the land, and because of that, the rent is too damn high in Oslo right now. And it is really damn high, and they have a housing crisis just like we do. But they got one thing right, and that was their resource policy. And that is the reason that Norwegians are filthy, stinking rich today, which the Swedes never cease to remind us about how conceited we've gotten because of that. To be fair, they subjected us to a personal union under a fake French king, so for a century, so they can stuff it. But my point being is that Norwegian Georgists in the early 1900s established a hydropower system on Georgist principles. And in the 70s, an Iraqi petroleum geologist showed up in Norway looking for a job at the exact same time the Norwegians, with no local expertise, discovered that they had just discovered, pardon my French, a metric F-ton of oil, and they had no idea what to do with it. And this Iraqi petroleum geologist, married to a Norwegian woman, said, "You're going to have the resource curse. I saw how that ravaged and destroyed my homeland of Iraq. And you have two choices available to you. You can either let the Americans do whatever they want and do the capitalist approach, or you can do the socialist approach and lose all expertise, lose investment, and basically set up a system that's going to be extremely inefficient, which is what the Soviets are doing. Or you can do the third decision," and then he outlined a system that could not have been more Georgist if he tried. I don't know that he fancies himself a Georgist, but he outlined a system that's almost exactly like the kind that Georgist principles would predict, and is based on exactly the same principles as the hydropower system was set up, which was set up by Norwegian Georgists. His name is Farouk al-Qasim, not a particular Norwegian name, but he is a Knight of the Order of St. Olav, and he deserves it. He is extremely highly regarded in Norwegian society. And I find whenever I look back over the last century, I see all these traces of the legacy of our own movement in places we don't expect, right? The referendum, for instance, was a policy that Georgists fought for. The Australian ballot which is the secret ballot, was a policy that Georgists fought for. The direct election of senators was a policy that Georgists fought for. And here we are at the end of the second Gilded Age, and it's like, okay, well, we tried it once, and things didn't turn out how we wanted. So what's going to happen now? Like, is Georgism going to go back to sleep for another 100 years, or are we going to finally get things right? And I say that one of three things will happen. One, we will invent instant point-to-point matter teleportation, just like in Star Trek, and then we will not have a problem to solve anymore. I do not think this will happen. So I do not think there will be a third frontier. Some people said that it would be Zoom. That frontier closed in about 5 minutes. And anyone who has been paying attention to house prices in suburbs and watching them rise by exactly the arbitration difference you can get by moving to a suburb and keeping your tech job, the price is raised by exactly that amount. So anyone who saw that can testify to the fact that the Zoom frontier has long closed. So I don't think there's going to be another frontier. I think Elon's going to take a little longer to get to Mars than people expect, and also a little longer for that to become someplace anyone wants to go, for it to matter on our timeline. Okay, so what's the other thing that could happen? Well, as I like to say, talk to your peasants about land reform before someone else does. Because ultimately,
True.
Because ultimately, this is the other thing that happened in the 20th century. There was this other ideology that had these other ideas about what to do with land and what to do with landlords. And these people's names were Lenin and Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot. And there was a fellow in Zimbabwe, but he got beaten out by a fellow by the name of Mugabe. And so
Joshua and Como.
Joshua Nkomo, that's right. And so we spent an entire century, wasted an entire century, fighting between two ideologies who treat land as a species of capital, and we see what that's gotten us. You know, and I certainly prefer one to the other, and it's the one that runs this country. But there's this other way, and so how do we avoid falling into that trap again? Okay, well, I think it looks a little unglamorous. I think it starts with a lot of humility. I think this is a little biased because it's what I happen to be good at. I think it involves a little mass appraisal and a little grappling with the quality of assessments. But I think it starts ultimately with this symbol. It starts with humility. It starts with coming back to the beginning and beginning to learn as a beginner with the heart of a beginner, and understanding that everyone in this play is a beginner, and we need to find a way to come to them in that spirit so that we all can learn again and begin anew at the beginning of this new century. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
That was great.
Yeah, that was good. I liked it.
All right, good. Thank you.